Tropical rainforests are one of the oldest continuous living entities on Earth, older than many of the stars. This rainforest has been evolving for 130 million years. Season after season, century on century, the forest has been shaping the destiny of the creatures it shelters, as they in turn have shaped their forest. This story of an Asian rainforest is the story of the remarkable relationship between the forest and its plants and animals. The dawn chorus of primates is a truly Asian sound, for Asia has the greatest diversity of primates anywhere on Earth. The new day begins like the countless millions that have dawned before. The forest and the myriad creatures within it stir to the coming of light and warmth. The rainforest in all its complexity can be seen as a single living organism. It consumes rain and warmth and exhales oxygen. The canopy of the rainforest is like the outer skin. It receives the most sunlight. It's the most exposed to wind and rain, and it protects the forest beneath. Rainforests are incredibly rich. Although they cover only 5% of the Earth's surface, they're home to at least half of all the species of plants and animals on Earth. High in the treetops, the animals wake hungry. The Thomas's leaf monkeys spring across the canopy, looking for breakfast. Asia's great red ape, the orangutan, live in the stronger branches midway down the trees. They too are setting off for breakfast. Siamang herald the morning with a duet of love. The calls between male and female are also a proclamation of their territory. A most fascinating example of the relationship between the forest and its creatures is that between a group of great red apes and the remote corner of the Sumatran rainforest where they live. They've been studied for more than 5 years. Their behavior offers a glimpse into the past of the orangutan and a hope for their future. Each has been given a name. Andai is a 9-year-old female. She's getting used to living on her own after her mother eased her aside to make way for her new baby sister. Her mother, Arnie, will be devoted to her new infant for 8 years, just as she was to Andai. Arno, the father of Andai, is the dominant male of this part of the forest, and probably the father of almost all the youngsters in his territory. Orangutan means people of the forest. The Malay have a legend that the orangutan was so intelligent that it never learned to speak, fearing that if it did, it would be put out to work. Arno has the demeanor of a gentle giant, yet he would have fought fiercely to become the dominant male. He leads a solitary life, leaving the upbringing of his children entirely to the females. The simplest relationship that the orangutan have with the forest is also the most natural. Gravity ensures that sooner or later, everything they eat or touch falls to the ground. The forest floor is where everything ends up. Dead animals, leaves, seeds, and droppings.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required.
Fresh orangutan dung seems to have a life of its own. Attracted by the smell, dung beetles soon begin the recycling process. The beetles carve up the dung and pat it into balls which are easy to roll away and bury. They will lay their eggs in the dung. Eventually it'll all be recycled and the nutrients reabsorbed into the trees. The forest floor is the gut of the forest. The forest digests its waste in less than an hour. The leaf litter takes longer to decompose, but eventually the nutrients are leached out of the leaves and into the soils. Ants are the most common insects of the rainforest, and they too play an important part in the recycling of rainforest nutrients. These ants are dismembering a hornet to take back to their nest. Ants and their termite cousins are a vital part of the forest's digestive system. Termites break down rotting wood and carry it along well-worn forest trails to their nests. Along these routes, they and their precious food are guarded by soldiers. Although they're tiny, insects are forest heavyweights. They make up a third of the mass of all the animals in the rainforest. For creatures higher up the food chain, insects are a valuable source of protein. Above the termite trail, a spider lies in wait, snaring an unsuspecting victim. As they approach the nest with their load, the termite trail becomes a living conveyor belt. And despite appearances, there is also order in the rainforest canopy. The leaf-eating monkeys are following well-jumped pathways. It's mid-morning, and they crisscross their territories searching for food. They catapult into space, with the confidence that comes from countless generations of living with the forest. The leaf-eating monkeys live in small groups of females with a dominant male. The size of his group is determined by the forest. Since the male likes to be able to keep an eye on them all, the thicker the forest, the smaller the group. All the members of his harem are equal. There's no top female with first claim to the feeding area. The leaf-eating monkeys are freeloaders. They give little back to the forest. By taking fresh leaves, they rob trees of their means of absorbing light and energy. By destroying seeds, they make it harder for trees to reproduce. The trees tolerate these charming bandits, but they fight back by introducing toxins into the maturing leaves which spoil the taste. Below the leaf monkeys, in the mid-branches, orangutan play a much more constructive role. They mostly eat fruit. Because they're big, they need to be big eaters. Fruiting trees are scattered throughout the forest. Each animal has a three-dimensional map in its brain and knows where and when fruit will ripen and how to get there. As they move from one tree to the next, eating as they go, the orangutan disperse the seeds of many species, a major role in the growth of the forest. Orangutan range throughout the northern Sumatran hill forests, but when fruit is plentiful, they gather in their greatest numbers in the low-lying swamp forest. It's here that their relationships with each other and the forest are being studied. This male is nearing his prime. Perhaps one day he'll challenge Arno to be the dominant male. But until he's sure he'll win, he stays well clear. The forest has adapted to the size of these orangutan by producing many of their favorite fruits close to the trunk where they're easily reached. This male will return to this tree again and again throughout the 50 or so years of his life. One of the longest relationships anywhere between a tree and an animal. The closest bond in the animal world is between a female orangutan and her infant. This intensive mothering is the bond that shapes the infant's life. The mother is the source of food, shelter, transport, and the vital lessons for life. She will pass on all her knowledge of the forest and its fruitings, without which the infant couldn't survive. Part of the knowledge that Arnie passed on to Andai was a way of using a tool to solve a problem. Behavior that has been seen in the wild only in this swamp forest. One of the delicacies the orangutan enjoy are the seeds of the chamagan fruit. As the fruit ripens, the shells split to reveal the seeds inside. The problem for the orangutan is the sharp hairs, painful to touch, which protect the seeds. Sometime in the past, one of them worked out how to overcome the plant's defenses. Now Andi has learned to put the stick in her mouth and use it to pry out the seeds. The seeds either drop into her mouth or her hands. The hairs flutter to the ground. Millions of years ago, our own ancestors first learned to use tools. We don't know whether orangutan learned to do this only recently, or whether they've been doing it for centuries or millennia. What is certain is that this behavior has never been recorded in any other group of orangutan. We once believed that our ability to use tools separated us from the rest of the animal kingdom. Perhaps Andi is showing us that orangutan are even closer to us than we imagined. With the two prerequisites for life, sunshine and water, abundant, rainforests are one of the most favorable environments for plant growth on Earth. A square kilometer of rainforest can have as many as 10,000 species. This is the realm of the red ape. In the tropics, there are two seasons, the wet and the dry. Plants flower and fruit according to their own cycle. The rainforests of North Sumatra lie close to the equator and receive almost equal hours of daylight and darkness. Yet for each individual tree, the amount of light it receives depends on its place in the forest. The forest floor sees sunlight only at midday. The mid-branches receive about 8 hours. The treetops see light from sunrise to sunset. During the day, the leaves of the canopy are in almost constant sunlight. The mid-branches, however, receive only filtered light. And at midday, when the sun is directly above the trees, the forest floor receives only dappled light as passing sunspecks. It is this limited supply of light that restricts growth on the forest floor. This pattern of light is interrupted only when a tree dies and falls, creating a gap in the canopy, which there is a race to fill. Creepers wind their way around other plants to haul themselves upwards, while saplings stretch towards the light. Very soon the canopy is complete. The race is over. The winner takes all and the losers adjust to their rations of sunlight. Crucial to the relationship between the animals and the forest is their understanding of the seasonal cycles of different species. The animals always know where and when their favorite leaves and fruits are ripening. While some trees are in spring-like abundance, others will be shedding leaves as if it's autumn. Some seeds parachute away to germinate on the ground. Others are carried on water. The seeds may germinate many kilometers from the parent tree, so although the trees can't move, they can travel. In the dry season, the forest produces fewer leaves and seeds, so there's less food for everyone. If there's a stream in their territory, the leaf-eating monkeys supplement their diet with algae. They come down from the trees like travelers to an oasis. There's enough algae in the stream for several groups from overlapping territories to share. While they're up in their element, the canopy, the monkeys are safe from almost all predators. But on the ground, they are vulnerable. Females with older infants leave them in the trees. For as long as the leaf monkeys remain on the river, the male keeps a nervous watch. There are still some Sumatran tigers on the prowl. Unaware there's a tiger about, females with infants that are too young to leave in the trees bring them down with them to the water. Sometimes, even the most caring mothers become forgetful. However high his hopes, the tiger's chances of a meal are remote. As soon as he hears the leaf monkey's alarm call, he moves on. He has to kill only 2 or 3 times a week, and he knows when the monkeys are beyond reach. The mouse deer is the world's smallest hoofed animal. It has no protection against the tiger except its alertness. Its huge eyes are placed where it can best detect any movement. Its ears are alert to any dangerous sound. Despite its name, the mouse deer is a species somewhere between a pig and a deer. Indeed, the Malays have a legend that the mouse deer is a forest spirit, so clever that it can outwit the tiger. High in the trees, orangutan are safe from most predators. The biggest threat to this mother and her baby may be the unwanted attentions of a male. If he can get close enough, he will stop at nothing to mate, and both mother and child could be hurt. To keep out of harm's way, she moves to the thinner branches where she knows he can't follow. But the would-be suitor is probably more at risk. For in this part of the forest, Arno remains dominant. His presence is usually enough to keep other males at bay. There are still a few elephants in the Asian rainforest. By knocking down trees, they help disperse seeds and let in light. But the forest influences them too. The dense vegetation forces them to lead more solitary lives than their cousins in Africa. Even for elephants, the forest has its no-go areas. Some plants grow spines which discourage even the largest animals. Other plants enlist the services of insects in their defense. These ants help protect the wild raspberry by deterring leaf-eating caterpillars. Once they've driven the caterpillar off, the ants claim their reward. They milk a colony of aphids for the sugary secretion they produce from the sap of the raspberry. Perhaps the most crucial relationship of all is the role insects play in enabling the forest to reproduce. By offering irresistible nectar, these plants entice ants to travel from flower to flower, transferring the vital pollen. Throughout the forest, the same system of service and reward applies. Different plants flower at different times, attracting different pollinators. This flower attracts sweat bees. Pollination is the service the sweat bees provide. Their reward is nectar, which they carry back to their nest. From the nectar, the bees make honey as food for their larvae. Even the most singular of species follows the rules of service and reward. This bud will become the rainforest's largest and perhaps rarest flower, the rafflesia, which has no leaves or stem and draws its sustenance from the vine on which it lives. The rafflesia takes 4 or 5 years to flower and is pollinated mainly by flies which it attracts with a stench of rotting meat. It can reproduce easily only if another rafflesia is flowering within a fly's range. Once the flies have done their work, the Rafflesia dies. Like everything else on the forest floor, it is absorbed and recycled. Butterflies emerge to reproduce. Most butterfly species seek nectar from flowering plants. As they feed, transferring pollen from flower to flower, they make it possible for the plants to reproduce. Once they find a mate and lay their eggs, their work is done. At midday, the forest slows. High in the trees, the leaf monkeys pause after a morning of intensive feeding. They descend to a shady siesta spot to rest and fully digest the morning's leaves. The young will play. With no hint of danger, the male can afford a cat nap. The females become so drowsy that one mother dozes. While the Thomas's leaf monkeys come down into the mid-branches for their siesta, the siamang take their time out at the top. Playing serves a purpose for the young apes. This is how they learn how far they can leap, what weight a branch can carry, and what risks they can take. The learning never ends. Beneath the siamang in the mid-branches, the orangutan also pause. Female orangutan may have no more than 3 young in their lifetime, so each one is precious. Between this mother and her infant, there is something almost human. In the dry season, the rains are less frequent and usually arrive in the afternoon. Regular downpours are essential for life in the forest. The orangutan find shelter where they can. The canopy of the forest breaks the force of the rain and stops it from washing the topsoil away. Many trees have leaves which channel the rain to where it's needed most, their roots. Some plants have an umbrella to keep the rain out. After only a few hours, the sun returns. The heat builds up, and water is sucked up by the roots and then flows up through the trunk into the leaves where it is released, back into the atmosphere. Beneath the canopy, the humidity is high and relatively constant. As a result, the forest floor is constantly moist, and many creatures have evolved in this damp environment. Leeches depend on moisture, and Asia is one of the few places where they've adapted to live outside pools of water or slowly running streams. Leeches are hermaphrodites. Each is both male and female. Mating involves both partners passing sperm to fertilize each other's eggs. The mating begins when they attach their suckers to each other and sway their bodies until they can establish closer contact. Once the pair have aligned their sexual organs, they mate. Each of them can now go on its way with its own fertilized eggs. The adults can survive without water for only a few days, but even if they perish, their eggs will remain as a survival capsule for their species until the rains come again. Eons of rain have fallen on the forest. Much of the goodness has been washed away. Some plants have adapted to the poor soils by becoming predators. Asia is home to the world's greatest diversity of carnivorous pitcher plants, which entice their victims by exuding the sweet smell of nectar. This is service and reward with a twist. Insects are drawn to the trap by the promise of a reward, but they slip and then die. Instead, it is the plant that gets the reward: energy. Almost everything that falls inside the pitcher plant drowns and is digested. Yet even in a graveyard there is life. Somehow, mosquito larvae thrive in the pitcher's digestive juices. The pitcher plant is a gut within the gut of the forest. It's deep in a remote corner of northern Sumatra that the unique relationship between the great red ape and the rainforest is being studied. In one of the few remaining patches of lowland swamp forest, orangutan gather in greater numbers than have ever been seen elsewhere. They reveal secrets of how their ancestors may have lived before their habitat was lost. They come because the lowland swamp forest is richer. Trees here produce more fruit than those in the hill forests. They also benefit from the constant wetness of the forest floor. Many of the insects that would normally live in nests in the ground make their homes instead in the trees, where they become an easy source of extra protein for the orangutan. Asia's largest primates congregate in the swamp forest for as long as the fruiting season lasts. This is where Andai grew up. She learned the forest from her mother. She and her companions know where food is and how to get it. Andai remembers the sweat bee's nest, and she also remembers the lessons she learned from her mother. She knows how to get the honey that is beyond the reach of her searching finger. As she did with the ptarmigan in this same forest, she uses a tool. It's just a twig, broken and shaped to length, But by using this simple tool, Andi and a few of her relatives are in a fellowship of their own. This is behavior they have learnt and remembered. Andi's new sister will learn the same lessons. It may be the birth of a new orangutan culture, or the revival of an ancient one. Why orangutan use tools here and possibly nowhere else remains something of a mystery. When she's finished the honey, Andi will use her knowledge of the forest to travel to another tree. The sweat bees return instinctively to repair their nest. Orangutan chews different food at different times. After she's had enough honey, Andi always nibbles a leaf, perhaps to balance her diet. When the time comes for Andi to pass on what she's been taught, the learning will be easier, and the knowledge may spread faster because of the different way these orangutan live. We used to think that they were almost always solitary animals, with the only bond between a mother and child, or when small groups gathered briefly around a fruiting fig tree. That may be true elsewhere. They return to the swamp forest season after season to socialize and learn with the same individuals. Adults and juveniles recognize each other and choose their companions carefully. If they were human, we would call them friends. Young orangutan here in the lowlands have the chance to play with each other far more frequently than their cousins in the hill forests. But they may not be able to pass on what they've learned here to new generations. Already, hunting and the destruction of their habitat have made orangutan an endangered species. Although they may be sociable during the day, at night the orangutan keep to themselves. Adults nest alone. At the end of each day, fresh branches furnish a new nest. Each night, a new nest. Each night, a new tree. For this infant, its mother is its world. Even as he makes his nest, Arno shapes the forest that still shapes him. As he settles for the night, he gives his long call, proclaiming his territory and his being. Arno's long call declares the importance of his species and his culture. It's a call to those who have power to save his realm in this corner of the Sumatran rainforest, and with it, Asia's great red ape and their unique way of life. Look into the eyes of some of the most extraordinary creatures on Earth. They were all cast away on islands in southeastern Asia. They've now been transformed into new species. This is the remarkable story of how some of Asia's animals came under the powerful spell of island magic. Southeast Asia shatters into archipelagos of thousands of islands. Some are ancient, others are very recent. The island of Java became separated from mainland Asia just 10,000 years ago. In its isolated forests, the top predator and most feared animal is the leopard. Nothing escapes its keen eye. Others must somehow avoid predation or die. On Java, it is the undisputed top of the food chain. The monitor lizard is another predator, but it's a small-time killer and scavenger. Nevertheless, on other islands in Southeast Asia, the monitor lizard can be king. Java was created at the end of the last ice age. As ice caps melted and sea levels rose, the land bridges to the mainland disappeared, and many animals were marooned on this new island. In the 10,000 years that Banteng cattle have been stranded on Java, they have changed from their mainland relatives. On an island where land is limited, the size of animals becomes crucial. On Java, the Banteng cattle have adapted by becoming significantly smaller. But bulk remains important, particularly for the bulls. The younger bull on the right has successfully challenged his older rival for control of the herd, but the loser keeps returning, refusing to accept his defeat. Soon the loser will give up his attempts to regain the females. His role in shaping the genetic future of this herd is over. He is frustrated at his loss. The loss of size of these island cattle is limited. On Java, they must be big enough to repel a leopard. Leopards do target the herds when the cows have young calves. For the rest of the year, they wisely leave the cattle alone. the leopard disappears, its spots merging with the dappled shadow of the forest. The safest place for Javan peacocks is among the banteng. The banteng stir up insects for the peacocks. In return, the peacock's sharp eyes warn the herd of danger. A male feels so confident among the cattle that he performs a ritual dance of courtship, displaying his magnificent tail and spectacular iridescent finery. Hens are attracted to males with a bright iridescent sheen on their feathers. On Java, the feathers are an iridescent green. On the mainland, they're royal blue. But island isolation can weave magic far more powerful than the color of a peacock's feathers. Change can be radical. Islanders have the chance to reinvent themselves, if they can survive. The predator is a most powerful agent of change. As Java's top predator, the leopard forces virtually every animal to adapt or die. But there is another agent of change on Java. It's far more gentle, but just as powerful. The fig tree is Java's tree of life. Its spreading branches tower above all rivals. The fig tree works its magic not through death, but by rewarding the animals and birds that come under its spell. Once a year for 7 or 8 days, each fig tree bursts into fruit. During that brief time, birds and animals are invited from far and wide to a party where they gorge themselves on the sticky sweetness of the fruit. And in return, the tree gets its reward. The guests later disperse fig seeds as they move around the forest. The many different fig trees on Java fruit throughout the year, and animals like long-tailed macaques are obliged to make endless pilgrimages from one fruiting tree to the next. Though the macaques love the figs, they don't depend on them. They're omnivorous. They don't mind what they eat. The ebony monkey is a specialist leaf eater. It doesn't need to travel far for its food needs. But for the next few days, it and the Javan gibbon will abandon this particular tree. The gibbon is wary of the noisy macaques and feeds at a respectful distance from them. Gibbons also follow the yearly fruiting cycle of fig trees, spending all their lives in the tops of trees. The troop of macaques forages below the fig tree. Wherever they travel, they taste almost anything around them. Whatever they eat, they usually drop most of it. But their mess is a bonus for fig eaters who can't climb. The monkeys are so confident they will feed right at the feet of the Rusa deer. For troops of macaques, each new fruiting fig tree becomes, for a few days, a safe haven, playground, and nursery. Mothers bear only one young at a time and devote enormous energy to raising each infant. Young females remain in their mother's group all their lives. But in 5 or 6 years, this young male will move out on his own. If he can learn to stay out of trouble. Like the macaque, the monitor lizard will also eat anything. Crabs, birds' eggs, and even baby monkeys. At about 1 meter from nose to tail, it's too small to be a threat to anything bigger. The deer don't give it a backward glance. As usual, the monitor is looking for an easy meal. The weak or the small. The monitor is in no hurry. A cold-blooded reptile, it needs to eat no more than once a month. But there is a bigger danger for all those who have come to the fig fruiting party. The noise of the revelers attracts an unwanted guest. The leopard needs fresh meat at least twice a week. The leopard sights a female warty pig and her litter. They too have come to the fig tree for the fallen fruit. The mother pig has so many babies she can scarcely keep track of them. The mother monkey keeps her infant well away from the leopard's clutches. Pig is one of the leopard's favorite foods, and the young piglets are naive and unwary. This has been the way of things on Java for 10,000 years. Though the leopard takes many piglets, there are always enough left to form the next generation. On Java, the leopard reigns. Animals must show respect and pay tribute, and no other animal pays more tribute than the pig. Even the monitor lizard must be wary. Like other creatures of the forest, it too must defer to the might of the velvet paw. Lest it becomes a meal itself, the monitor heads to a place where it has no rival. The lizard is as much at home on water as it is on land. The river is its highway, and the riverbank its hunting domain. Here the monitor has its own subjects, who ignore its presence at their peril. But there's another creature on the riverbank today for whom the river is a last refuge. Less than 70 Javan rhinos remain on Earth. It's the rarest large mammal in the world. The ponderous rhino is burdened by its enormous size. Large animals reproduce very slowly and need a lot of space. As people put more pressure on the remaining forests, the Javan rhino is trapped. The island is both sanctuary and prison. But the monitor lizard can easily move away when life becomes difficult. The river may take it to another beach or even beyond, to another island. In a branch overhanging the river, other long-distance travelers squabble for food. Fruit bats can use their wings to fly them to safety. Wherever the fruit bat flies, it takes with it the seeds of the fig. And that journey may be a very long one. Bats will fly 70 kilometers or more a night in search of a fruiting tree. It's therefore not at all unusual for strong winds, or perhaps a storm, to blow a bat off course, far out over the sea, to be cast ashore who knows where. In 1930, a violent eruption from the ocean floor thrust up a new island, just 40 kilometers off Java's west coast. From the moment the volcanic rock cooled, the island of Anak Krakatau offered great new opportunities for those of Java's species who could reach this brave new world. Initially, the slopes of the young volcano were devoid of life. The challenge for all travelers was to make landfall, find a foothold, and thrive. Over time, these random arrivals accumulated to form an eccentric community of castaways. In the 70 years since Anak Krakatau erupted from the ocean floor, a forest that includes fig trees has taken hold. The seeds for the first fig trees probably arrived with fruit bats, but those trees would have borne in fertile fruit. To fertilize them required another animal, a tiny pollen-bearing wasp. Not only did the wasp have to survive the hazardous journey from Java, but it had to arrive at the precise time when the ripening flowers, hidden deep within the fruit of the fig, were receptive. It's a mystery how long it took for this miracle of coincidence to happen. The fertilizing of fig fruit is in itself a minor miracle. The only way a female wasp can get into the fruit is through a narrow tunnel. It's such a tight squeeze she must shed her wings. Once inside, she seeks out a place to lay her eggs. But while she is searching, she brushes off the pollen, which she's been carrying in a hollow in her chest, onto the fig flowers. Once her pollinating and egg-laying work is done, she dies. Over the next few weeks, deep inside the fruit, the wasp eggs develop and then hatch. After hatching, the young males mate with females while still inside the fig. The males then drill holes in the walls, from which fertilized females emerge to carry pollen to the next receptive fruit. Once the wasps reached Anak Krakatau, figs could reproduce themselves without depending on chance arrivals from Java. Fig trees have now become one of the island's most important benefactors. Their enormous leaves filter the harsh sunlight. The litter beneath enriches the young island soil, providing a nursery for less hardy seedlings. With the beginnings of a forest secured, the stage is set for the arrival of new players. The monitor lizard makes an ideal long-distance traveler. Within 6 years of the eruption, the first monitor was washed ashore on Anak Krakatau. This latest visitor arrives on a beach strewn with driftwood. This debris could easily have served as rafts for less accomplished swimmers. From the moment it stepped ashore, it would have a harsh impact on all other animals arriving from the air or the sea. As the fiercest creature to arrive on Anak Krakatau, it became top predator. Here it had left the leopard, which is no great swimmer, far behind. The young forest provides shelter for the tentative community of travelers. The fig tree quickly assumed its role of provider and protector. The monitor is attracted by the fig eaters, just like the prowling leopard on Java. The difference here is that the top predator will eat anything, a part-time scavenger that consumes the living and the dead. Though the monitor was in charge from the moment it stepped ashore here more than half a century ago, it can't prevent the arrival of new travelers to this land of opportunity. Island magic is just beginning here. For the most spectacular island magic, one more ingredient is necessary: time. And lots of it. The island of Sulawesi to the northeast of Java has been isolated for 30 million years. From the handful of mammals that have managed to breach its isolation and penetrate its forests, Sulawesi has produced more than 100 new species. None of these species is found anywhere else. Perhaps the most wonderful examples are found among its monkeys. It's thought that the grey gorilla-like macaques of southern Sulawesi are closest to the first arrivals. They probably rafted here from mainland Asia less than 2 million years ago. The first families were so few and were isolated for so long, they evolved into separate species. Then came the ice ages, which gave rise to even more species. Each time an ice age came and went, groups of macaques were isolated as the waters surrounding the islands rose and fell. Repeated separations produced 7 new species in a remarkably short period. This remarkable speed of evolution was helped by small populations. Here, a change in behavior or appearance in a few can quickly spread and become a trademark of the new species. A good example is the absence of skin pigment or albinism, which is a common feature of this troop. In a large population, albinism would remain extremely rare. New species were created all over Sulawesi, from the ancestral form on the south coast to the crested black macaque of the northern tip of the island. All are very different. What they all share is the fact that they are untroubled by fierce predators. No big cats reach these shores. Unthreatened, a troop can enjoy a freshwater spring at the edge of the beach without a backward glance. Sulawesi must be the closest thing to primate paradise. If monkeys played like this, hour after hour, without looking out for predators anywhere else in Asia, it would be extremely dangerous. There is a purpose to the play of the young males. With no predators to fear, the greatest danger they face will be from their own kind. Because there's no risk in being conspicuous, the macaques travel in troops up to 50 strong. There's safety in numbers when the only threat would come from an even bigger troop. The ever-present monitor lizard is the nearest thing to a serpent in this Garden of Eden. But the monitor is hardly more than a reminder to the black macaques to keep an eye on their young. The defining badge of this species is the heart-shaped rump. When the females are on heat, their rumps swell. The dominant male makes sure he sires the next generation. The birth of young most often happens at the end of the rainy season, and that coincides with another major event in the life of the forest. The rhythm of life for the macaques on Sulawesi, like most other islands in Southeast Asia, is governed by the fruiting of the tree of life. There are more different fig trees in these forests than anywhere in the world. There are also plenty of fig eaters. The largest fig-eating bird is the Sulawesi red-knobbed hornbill. Though Sulawesi has the highest density of hornbills in Asia, the red-knobbed hornbill is only found here. The bird and the fig tree have come to depend closely on each other. Male hornbills are collecting more than they can eat. They cram their blue throat pouches with fruit and then set off across the treetops. The hole high up in the tree conceals a mother and her solitary chick. It is, however, within the range of a tree-climbing lizard. The birds take no chances. The female has sealed herself inside the hole with her own excrement, which is sticky with figs when applied, but dries as hard as concrete. She leaves a narrow slit for the male to poster his ripe figs. Here she stays, a prisoner to motherhood until her chick is old enough and can avoid the clutches of the monitor lizard. At the fruiting fig tree is another female hornbill. She's chiseled her way out of the nest after 13 weeks of confinement. She and her mate are kept busy, running a shuttle feeding service back to their chick. By rewarding the hornbills with sweet, sugary fruit, the fig tree recruits the birds to spread its seeds far and wide through the forest. Hornbills have the same experience as any human fig fancier. Figs contain a mild laxative, and within a short time it does its work. Most fig seeds have no chance of germinating, however. They're killed by sunlight and by drying out. Seeds that do make it to the forest floor can find suitable germinating conditions, but the competition down here is intense. These seedlings will only thrive if a forest giant falls and creates a gap. Even then, only one of these hopefuls will ever make it. One group of figs has an advantage over its competitors. When their seeds reach the forest floor, their journey may not be over. Although they've passed through the digestive system of the hornbill, the seeds of the Strangler fig still contain a bribe, a fatty package coveted by ants. The ants pull the seeds from the droppings and haul them up to their nests high in the canopy. This unlikely snack is the reward the figs offer the ants for giving their seeds a leg up to the light. Strangler figs flourish high above the competition. They send their roots back down the trunk of the host tree to seek out the goodness of the earth, 30 meters below. In time, the tree's roots multiply profusely until a massive skirt of stilt-like roots surrounds the host tree. But as the name Strangler fig suggests, it's a fatal embrace, one which eventually chokes the host tree and kills it. Finally, the host tree rots away, leaving a hollow chimney of the Strangler fig's roots. One day this host tree will meet such a fate, and the hornbills who nest there will have to find a new home. It's no wonder both parents are out searching for food. The chick's insistent clamoring is hard to ignore. It'll be another 4 weeks before it leaves the nest. This lengthy development is one of the longest of any hornbill. Most species supplement their diet of fruit with insects, but the red-knobbed hornbill chick will grow up almost exclusively on figs. Hornbills mate for life, returning year after year to breed in the same tree. Their total attentiveness to their one chick ensures a very high survival rate. The female is very drab compared to the male. He dresses to please her. It's surely no coincidence that his bill is the exact same colors as the figs he eats. His face is a celebration of the fruit on which they depend totally. The hornbills pay no attention to a fruiting fig close to the nest. This fig tree even looks different from others in the forest. Its fruit grows along branches rather than at its tips. They ripen green and unsweetened. With so many fig trees vying for fruit eaters, this one has targeted a different market, a tree-climbing leaf eater. The fruit may look like figs, but they taste like young leaves. One of the animals for which the tree has gone to all this trouble is the bear cuscus. It behaves like a monkey, but it's an entirely different creature. When it arrived on Sulawesi, it found an island without leaf-eating monkeys, so it behaved like one. An extraordinary partnership began between a remarkable tree and an unusual animal. In order to eat leaves, it had to develop a stomach large enough to digest greenery, and so it became a giant, the world's largest cuscus, a marsupial. It began its journey to Sulawesi in Australia, home of many other marsupials. Precisely how it got here is a mystery. Probably it rode on shifting fragments of the Australian continent and then rafted on drifting vegetation. This extraordinary magic happened not to one kind of cuscus, but to two. And as the giant cuscus beds down for the night, its opposite emerges. They're as different as night from day. One has become a giant, the other a dwarf. Marsupials like the cuscus usually carry their young in a pouch, but this youngster's far too big to be carried this way any longer. During her last few weeks as an infant, she rides piggyback, learning the secrets of the night forest. Even at night, the hornbill's fruiting fig tree continues to draw visitors from throughout the forest. The dwarf cuscus is more typical of its kind. It's a fruit eater, with a passion for red figs. Although the youngster's close to full grown, it still needs to learn what fruit to eat and what fruit to avoid. The safest way to do that is to steal from mum. The dwarf cuscus thrives here. But Sulawesi magic has shrunk this animal into the smallest cuscus in the world. Islands often drive animals to extremes of size. Below the tree is another creature which has also shrunk. The anoa is the world's smallest buffalo. Without predators, Sulawesi magic has transformed this ancient creature into the Bambi of the buffalo world. The anoa is partial to figs, and remarkably, a fig tree has evolved here to cater to its needs. A fig with fruit at the base of the trunk is ideal for leaf eaters that can't climb. It also makes a meal of any figs it finds on the forest floor. Disturbing the peace is a band of even more bizarre fig eaters. The fearsome faces of the intruders mask nothing more dangerous than a pig, the strange babirusa. The snuffling disruption is too much for the solitary anoa. Their fearsome curving tusks and teeth are little more than decoration, used by males to impress one another. They are grotesque masks in an ancient Indonesian shadow play. The female babirusa has no tusks. More significantly, on an island without predators, she can raise only one young at a time. The babirusa are also drawn to the peculiar fig tree which fruits close to the ground. The lowest fruit even ripens down in the soil and among the leaves. Isolated in this part of Asia for millions of years, these figs have turned to two of the island's most bizarre and ancient creatures to help spread their seeds. Although the babirusa and the anoa may be unthreatened, the dark forest does conceal a tribe of fierce gremlins. Some make their home in the heart of the Strangler fig, from where they emerge each night to hunt. The tiny tyrant of the forest floor is the spectral tarsier, one of the smallest primates in the world. They have huge eyes that miss nothing in the night, and ears so finely tuned they detect the slightest rustle. The leaf mantis looks like a dead leaf, but it sounds like an insect. Tarsiers feed almost entirely on insects. In parts of Asia where predators lurk in the trees, the tiny tarsier would be hunted by many animals. On Sulawesi, they are the hunters. They swivel their heads just like an owl to fix an unblinking stare on their next victim. Tarsiers are ancient primates, related to monkeys and to humans. It can be seen in their tiny grasping hands and in the strong family unity they've developed. Each night, family members go off on their own, hunting. Through the night, they keep in touch by long-distance calls. As dawn approaches, the calls become appeals to get together again. Finally, they retreat into the family home, deep inside the Strangler fig tree. Nearly all of Sulawesi's animals have been touched by island magic. The monitor lizard is a notable exception. Like the fruit bat, it comes and goes on Sulawesi. It has never been isolated here long enough to be changed. But there are islands that have worked incredible magic, even on this tough and resilient character. The recipe for the spell is, of course, the well-tried formula of isolation and time. Far to the east of Sulawesi, on an island at Asia's extreme edge, the predatory monitor lizard has been transformed into a gentle vegetarian. The emerald tree monitor is perfectly camouflaged in the one tree that provides for so many of Asia's islanders. It can even use its tail like a fifth hand. The emerald tree monitor can scamper like a squirrel on slender branches. This small jewel was created by the power of the fig. On another island, at Asia's southern limit, the same spell of time and isolation have conjured a different lizard, able to contemplate a different kind of prey. It's only now, after several years, that this young lizard can leave the trees in safety. It has a lot of growing to do before it'll be big enough and brave enough to join its parents at a full-scale dragon banquet. This is the ultimate island giant, the largest lizard in the world. Like the monitor lizard, the dragon can scavenge for a meal. Unlike every other lizard, it has the power to bring down animals much heavier and faster than itself. Dragons carve the carcass into bite-sized chunks with their razor-sharp teeth. It is a primeval scene. It's as if dinosaurs once more ruled the land. But this terrifying creature is simply an overgrown monitor lizard. And like the lizard, when there's no food, this dragon can lie low and survive for months, and then re-emerge supreme. Like the leopard on Java, on Komodo Island, this lizard has achieved an awesome power. Here, the true dragon of Asia has become the ruler of an island. Back on the Asian continent, the pace and scope of evolutionary change has been slower and far less eccentric. But dragons, giants, dwarfs, and many other wondrous animal designs are the fruits of island magic. Asia's coasts are the frontier between two great rivals. Land and sea constantly test each other's borders along 200,000 kilometers of Asia's shoreline. In the tropics, equatorial sun magnifies the power of earth and ocean to nurture an extraordinary profusion of life. There are sea creatures here who cling to the coast throughout their lives. Others are ocean travelers who return to the coasts only to breed and support their young. Half the world away, the seas of Asia's far north freeze during long months of winter and lock their shores in brutal cold. But when summer sun drives back the ice, these bare coasts will thrive with life. Land animals rely on the shoreline too. Through countless generations, they've survived on its rich seasons. Asia's fertile coasts harvest the endless bargaining of land and sea, and their own vital power reaches far inland and out into the ocean. Monsoon clouds over the Indian mountain lands are part of the great cycle of exchange between land and sea. Heavy with moisture swept up from the ocean, they burst, beginning a chain reaction which will reach the distant coast. For the land animals, it's a time of renewal. Rich growth promises survivors of long, dry months that they'll see out a new season. People have been starved of water too. Usually the downpour's a blessing and time for celebration. Torrents of water laden with rich sediment will prepare their land for crops. But at sea level, the water's blessing can turn into a curse. When high rivers collide with high tides, disastrous floods spill across vast areas of coastal plains. Every drop of rain plunders the land. But rivers that carry off the spoils must pass through forests spread like great nets along the coast, waiting to steal the earth back again. Mangrove forests turn raw sediment to energy, and from India to Indonesia they shield their soft and muddy coasts against the forces of the ocean. Plants and animals have been evolving in these forests for 65 million years. They still shelter and sustain a vast community of creatures. Saltwater crocodiles are ancient users of the mangroves. Long ago, these members of the crocodile family adapted to hunt the fertile waters between land and sea. High tide brings other predators from the ocean. Sea snakes hunting for goby fish, and stingrays which dredge the mud for crustaceans. Mangroves are such a rich hunting ground because they're a nursery for so many land and sea creatures. This female's raising her young in these sheltered waters. At nearly a month old, they're confident enough to venture freely amongst the mangrove roots. They haven't eaten since hatching, but when they're hungry, they'll hunt their first meal in the mangroves. Their mother's lurking not far away, discreetly checking out intruders. The pork pie crab's heavy armor would have done him little good if he'd been just a bit slower and she a bit closer. But he gets the chance to sidle back to safety, while she continues her patrol. Tall mangroves are safe overnight roosts for Borneo's proboscis monkeys. In the mornings, they're launching pads for sociable climbers. Many other monkeys visit Asian mangroves, but few depend on them as much as proboscis. They house a powerful digestion inside their roomy stomachs, so they can feed heavily on salty, tough mangrove leaves. But as coastal forests have dwindled, many groups now rely on remnant mangroves, where even proboscis find the pickings lean. The senior male on sentry duty is anxious. Careless visitors to the water's edge are moving into danger. His alarm call alerts the troop. A hidden crocodile's even more dangerous. And the panic sends one monkey right into the jaws of danger. But the crocs missed her opportunity. The rest of the troop takes a more cautious route back to the swamp forest. Like the crocodile, the trees have evolved to cope with this salty world. The mud they grow on is rich, but it's starved of oxygen, and the constant floods of seawater would poison most other plants. What looks like drowned debris is the forest's answer to its problem. These are the roots and lungs of living trees. As soon as the tide falls, They begin to harvest oxygen through special breathing cells in their exposed roots. And somehow, tender young plants are able to gain a foothold in this shifting, salty world. Each mangrove species has a way of giving its young a better chance of surviving. Some get a head start by beginning to grow while still attached to their parent tree. The long spears hanging down are immature mangroves, which are only planted when they're strong enough to survive the salty water. A lucky fall can plant a new seedling, but natural buoyancy and strong tides carry others far away, perhaps to found a new forest. The trees send more than their newborn to the ocean. They use sunlight and air to convert the nutrients of raw sediment into growth. The forest's like an immense storage battery, with every leaf an individual cell. Each leaf that falls begins to release new energy to the water. As the tide flows out of the mangrove, it carries off a rich stew of rotting organic material. Mangrove roots that spike the foreshore trap debris from the ocean too. As mangrove animals pick at this flotsam, they make their own contribution to the richness of the shoreline. Monitor lizards make regular patrols, searching for carrion delivered by the falling tide. At low tide, a huge community of creatures emerges to feed on the mud. Fiddler crabs pack the best part of their lives into the time between the tides. Females feed at frantic speed. Hungry males are hampered by the super claw they use for defense and display. The low, slack tide provides quiet water and a gentle ramp for the young crocs to crawl ashore. But they're still supervised by a watchful mother. As they venture from the water, the young crocs are feeling hunger for the first time, and the mud is crawling with potential meals. This female fiddler crab could become an unwilling player in a young croc's graduation from infant to hunter. First, the youngster stalks, then, even out of the water, uses classic croc ambush technique. Once in a good strike position, he freezes. The head shake to tear the prey apart is all croc instinct. One day he'll do it to pigs and monkeys. But now he heads for shelter, to avoid other foragers in the mangrove. Troops of long-tailed macaques know where in their territory to find a meal, and that low tide delivers good pickings. They're such frequent foragers here that they're also called crab-eating macaques. It's said they use their tails to lure crabs from their burrows but they're more likely to dig vigorously to reach a meal, which might be animal, but could also be stranded nuts or fruits. The sea's lowest ebb reveals the tidal zone. Neither earth nor ocean entirely rules these sand flats, or the muddy world which christened the Mudskipper. Perhaps the fishes which first crawled out of the ancient seas looked a bit like this. They're creatures of two worlds, fish which emerge from burrows to feed in the air. They graze the film of algae that clings to the surface of the mud. But these fish out of water have to breathe like fish. So every few minutes they return to tide pools to replenish their gill pouches with new supplies of water. His burrow is the center of a male mudskipper's world. This one could be mining a network of tunnels as much as 5 meters long. The burrows of mudskippers and other tunnelers play a vital part in taking air and water down into the suffocating mud which has been dumped from the land. As soon as the skippers emerge onto their muddy landscape, they stake their territory, and they proclaim it by raising their flags. A warning, gaping mouth may be enough to drive off an intruder. If not, there's a full-scale joust to the ancient rules of mouth fighting. Victory usually goes to the mudskipper, energetic enough to keep up the ferocious display. As the returning tide starts to shrink the landscape, the skippers crowd onto the diminishing islands of mud. They're running out of time to do all the things that mudskippers have to do between the tides. Feed, maintain the burrow, display and defend the territory, perhaps even find a mate. Some are still trying frantically to complete their task list as the tide closes over them. Young seedlings have made good use of the low tide too, to grow stronger and tighten their hold on their slippery foundations. As they mature, mangrove forests become great allies of the land, colonizing more and more of its muddy coasts as it slowly pushes out its border with the sea. The hard coasts of Indonesia are raised by a more dynamic force. Towering volcanic islands are stepping stones along a Pacific ring of fire, marking the battleground between two great geological plates. The land and the seabed are constantly twisted and breached as the earth struggles against itself. At any moment, these beaded curtains of gas escaping from the sea floor could be torn apart by titanic volcanic forces. Devastating eruptions on the surface leave their debris underwater. Life must struggle out through suffocating blankets of volcanic sand. The problem of surviving here often inspires bizarre solutions. The feathermouth sea cucumber harvests sand like an industrial mining machine, while shrimps hitch a lift and turn over the tailings. The shrimps have a safe host. Most sea cucumbers are unpalatable to predators. It extracts food from the sand, passing the leftovers straight through. Fast-moving predators pursue food wherever they like. But on the exposed sea floor, many creatures use different strategies to hunt and to escape being hunted. The hunchback scorpionfish behaves like a self-propelled rock, with a painfully slow top speed. But it's got a mouth like a mine shaft to engulf unwary prey. By comparison, the Pegasus sea moth's version of the mobile rock is supercharged. They vacuum up prey as they patrol the sea floor. There's probably a point to this game of follow the leader. As the fish in front stirs up the bottom, there's more food for the follower to harvest. They look like a genetic engineer's nightmare, but they're miracles of design compared to the devilfish. His disguise of a weed-covered rock deceives hunters, but seems to impede his own hunting. His quarry could be this cryptically striped hawkfish. But the hawkfish is hunting too. Just beyond devilfish reach, he waits for prey disturbed by his clumsy pursuer. There's food arriving here all the time, a rain of organic debris washed from the nearby land. As each leaf breaks down, it releases energy to the ocean's creatures. But before their decay is complete, some of these earthly spoils will find another extraordinary use. Ghost pipefish don't just imitate the form and color of leaves. They mimic the dance of leaves stirred by gentle currents. They're so confident in their camouflage and choreography that they leave the original behind to dance their own way across the sea floor. The gathering debris becomes a wardrobe full of disguises. But cockatoo waspfish aren't dancers. Their design almost traps them between dimensions as they flounder along beside a sheltering leaf. They've chosen a right-colored leaf for disguise, but between two cockatoo waspfish it becomes a kind of territory, which they seem to dispute with feeble headbutts. The sea constantly tries to tear down these new volcanic shores. But in tropical oceans, the waves are competing with a builder who constantly renews the coastal ramparts. Wherever the slightest eddy offers a toehold, coral begins to build. At first, these might be only pioneer settlements, isolated life support systems for small communities. But from these outposts, coral sends more colonists into the warm tropical currents. Each coral has a spawning time, precisely triggered by phases of the moon, day length and water temperature, when it releases millions of eggs. Although only a tiny number will survive, each fertilized egg has the potential to lay a new foundation or provide a spectacular addition to an existing reef. As they're released, the eggs float upwards to be carried along by surface currents. Some species may drift for 2 or 3 months before reaching a place to settle, and then build. And once it's established, each coral polyp can produce crowds of identical copies of itself. Coral can build a coast where none existed before. As countless generations of corals die, their skeletons become the massive foundations of living reefs. These architectural feats are powered by an extraordinary advantage that coral has over other animals. It's a plant as well. Inside each polyp are tiny vegetable cells which, like plants, use photosynthesis to feed on sunlight. The plentiful light of the equatorial tropics provides the energy for coral to build its sun palaces. As reef-building corals claim more and more of the seabed, they create thriving oases of life. Indonesia's coral coasts feed and shelter the greatest variety of marine life on the planet. In the oldest warm ocean on Earth, these creatures have spent uncountable generations evolving their form and way of life. And every animal that lives here increases the reef's power to sustain more life. But each new generation that crowds onto the reef faces a new test of its survival skills. Sea snakes, like this banded crate, specialize in hunting goby fish that hide in burrows. Sometimes it's someone else's home, but because they're extremely venomous, sea snakes can take a very direct approach to foraging. But when a cuttlefish hunts, it uses the subtlety and skill of a higher being, with sharp eyes and a highly developed sensitive nervous system. By triggering pigment cells in its skin, it can change color instantly. The rippling patterns disguise it from predators and from its prey. Propelled by water jetted through its body, it hovers over the reef like a psychedelic airship. As it gets closer to its prey, its strobing increases, helping it blend with the movement and dappled light around it. But many of the smallest reef animals aren't highly skilled hunters, and they're not strong or mobile. Instead, they use their neighbors and ingenious strategies of deception. The feather star's an animal imitating a plant, and beside it, An ornate ghost pipefish, fanning his eggs, is safely camouflaged as a feather star. Everywhere on the reef, species are forced to live on top of each other, just to have a place to grow and breed. One of the most extraordinary relationships is between the Gorgonian sea fan, a coral, and its tiny tenants. The pygmy seahorses are barely the width of a fingernail. They haven't only matched their color to their chosen home, they've also modeled their bodies in the shape of its bumpy polyps. The seahorses, a host of other microscopic creatures, and the sea fan itself are all feeding on particles netted from the nutrient-rich tide. The fan, less than a meter wide, is all the seahorses need to sustain themselves and to breed a new generation. The overweight seahorse in front is pregnant. But even these tiny creatures use tiny headbutts to defend their corner of their small world. Reef creatures which range more widely have to be just as ingenious to find their own kind and breed successfully. Bright colors are little help to nudibranchs in advertising to each other, but they warn predators of an unpalatable or poisonous meal. When they're ready to breed, nudibranchs use the rather haphazard technique of finding and following each other's scented slime trails. But at the end of the search, they're guaranteed a mate of the right sex, because they're hermaphrodites. Each animal is both male and female. As soon as they're close enough, they mate by exchanging their packages of sperm. A male mandarin fish doesn't go looking for a mate. First, he stakes out his territory by driving off a competing male. But his opponent's persistent and tries to invade again. This time he'll make sure the trespassers left the property before resuming his own display. Along the path of history, the secretive mandarin fish, distant relatives of the mudskipper, were handed a ration of sheer beauty. He's managed to attract 2 females from their shelter under the reef, but has no difficulty in deciding his partner. The loser makes a jealous attempt to break the couple up. But they mate, releasing the drifting seeds of a new generation. Asia's coral reefs give their inhabitants all that they need. Even the reef's stony fabric is food. Bumphead parrotfish fuel their bulky frames by biting off coral and algae, pulverizing it with their beak-like jaws. More than a meter long and weighing nearly 50 kilos, they move in schools across the reefs, trailing the sandy debris of their meal behind them. Where they climb up from the deep ocean, reefs trigger even more spectacular displays of life. Food-rich currents funnel up the reef walls and explode into the sun-warmed coastal waters. It's solar energy, which for 200 million years has helped coral to build its coasts and sustain their extraordinary community of life. It's so bountiful a fuel that these jellyfish have been able to shed their stinging and hunting equipment to become part plants. Like coral, they use photosynthesis to harness the power of sunlight. The sun, which gifts such abundance to the tropical coasts, has a far shorter reign in Asia's far north. Through the winter, brutal cold locks vast areas of ocean under ice. Only at the edge of the ice can coastal creatures make a living. Steller's sea eagles are driven nearly 2,000 kilometers from their home shores. Here on the northern coast of Japan, at the limits of the frozen sea, they can find enough food to last until the spring. Only when the sun begins to drive back the frontier of ice do they begin their journey north to breed on the coasts of the Russian Far East. For 7 months, these subarctic coasts of Asia have been in hibernation, silent and barren. But as the ice starts to thaw, hundreds of thousands of birds begin to arrive, anticipating a rich season. Like the sea eagles, they've spent the winter at the edge of the ice and return here to breed. These are just the first arrivals of the vast community which will crowd onto the cliffs to raise their young during the brief Russian summer. As the ice melts away, it unlocks a great larder of plenty. These waters can't match the spectacular variety of the tropical reefs, but they're still extraordinarily fertile. And as light reaches down, it fires marine life into a burst of concentrated growth. Groups of Steller's sea lions come to hunt the fertile seas and breed their young on the coasts. Their foraging grounds are close to the shore, and because they're highly social animals, the sea lions spend a lot of their time just hanging out and playing in the shallow offshore waters. Their favorite haul-out points are on rocky offshore islands and isolated peninsulas. Adults and youngsters gather on these temporary homes. Younger males get the chance to spar with their elders, practicing skills they'll need to claim mates once they're old enough to breed. The Steller's sea eagles also have favorite sites to which they return each year. Some breed inland, but eagles which have nest sites on the coast have a choice of hunting grounds. They can take fish for their chicks from the ocean and river estuaries, or they can hunt the densely populated seabird colonies, where the numbers grow to millions. The eagles put great store in the natural security of their nest site. During foraging expeditions, they can be away for as long as 20 hours. The transition to this abundance is remarkable, but soon other visitors will arrive in even greater numbers. Every year, they bring a gift from the deep ocean, which is eagerly awaited by the creatures of the land. Vast numbers of pink salmon are preparing to travel upriver to breed. But before beginning their journey, they'll undergo a striking transformation triggered by the fresh water. The female skin will turn green, the male's to pink or brown. And the males grow a hooked jaw and the imposing dorsal hump, which gives their other name, humpback salmon. Each male will use these tools to assert his own breeding quality to the swarming mass of fish. For brown bears who fasted during the long winter months, the salmon are a huge opportunity to stock up. This young male, about 5 years old, spends hours every day plunging through the salmon shoals in a mixture of hunting and playing. He's got a variety of techniques. First, he snorkels to find the concentrations of fish, then tries to sneak up on them. Often as not, he misses, but he does catch as many as 20 fish an hour. He can't help but be successful. The salmon are easy prey while they wait here for their bodies to adjust to fresh water. And once they begin their journey inland, they'll meet more bears eager for a catch. A mother with cubs has to be cautious during fishing visits to the river. She must always be ready to move them to safety. The greatest danger is that they'll come across a large male foraging along the river. This one has a fairly relaxed attitude to territory and usually avoids disputes with other males. They'd both be badly hurt in a fight. But if cubs cross his path, there's a good chance that he'll kill and eat them, and perhaps kill their mother as well. But when danger's near, the safest place is close to mother. Meanwhile, the young male's making the most of his opportunities. As he gets more successful, he takes to eating only his favorite part of the salmon: the brains, the eggs of females, or the skin. But however many he eats, there are still countless survivors ready to begin the hard journey inland. The river is riddled with obstacles. Shallow water challenges all the salmon, but especially the males. Their huge humps are good for display, but in the rapids they're a burden. As they power against the current, the males burn huge amounts of energy. They stopped eating when they entered the river, and every obstacle saps reserves that will never be restored. So after each struggle they rest when they reach quiet water. The journey's taking its toll. Wounds fester. Aggressive growths invade their skin and eat them alive. Small river fish stand by to feed on casualties. Later they'll even steal eggs once the salmon begin mating. The salmon have a long way to go, though. The breeding ground for this group is nearly 100 kilometers from the coast. The sea eagles follow the salmon upriver too. But while they're away from the nest, there's another struggle going on. One of the chicks is already much stronger than the other, and it spends hours repeatedly harassing its weaker rival. The adults will soon have only one mouth to feed. Even the parents' return to the nest isn't enough to halt the campaign of destruction. By disabling his competitor, he's doubled his chances of flying. As the main river divides into tributaries, each salmon follows the scent of the stream bed where it was born. In the narrower and steeper waterways, the casualty rate begins to climb. There's an obstacle ahead, and as more and more fish press into the stream, the oxygen level in the water drops. First they begin to tire, then to suffocate. Only the strong and the lucky will battle their way over the final barrier to the breeding grounds. Each female chooses a site for her nest. By flapping her tail to lift the gravel, she creates a hollow in the riverbed. Males are attracted and begin to circle and compete. Only the strongest have survived the journey. Males displaying the most impressive humps will be favored as mates. Their fiercely hooked jaws drive the message home to less well-endowed rivals. As she nestles onto the riverbed and prepares to lay, males close in and vibrate their bodies to encourage her. Eager for a meal of eggs, the river fish join in. As the female begins laying, males crowd onto the nest and angrily challenge each other for the right to fertilize her eggs. Every nesting female provokes the same fierce drama played out countless times in hundreds of stream beds. And at every stage of their journey from the coast, the salmon have left a harvest for others to gather. There's been abundant food to be carried back to hungry youngsters waiting in the seabird colonies. And now they're growing strong enough to begin their own journey. By the end of the salmon run, the bears are glutted. In a bumper season, the young bears put on a good store of fat to carry him through the winter. Even if the river still teemed with fish, he probably wouldn't bother to chase them. As part of his preparation for winter, he'll soon be a vegetarian, feeding on berries and nuts. It's time for him to leave the coast and find a safe den to shelter him from freezing temperatures. But next year he'll come down from the mountains again to his favorite fishing spot on the coast. At the sea eagle nest, the survivor tries his wings. Soon he'll fly freely and be able to forage for himself. When he does, he'll find a huge supply of food to strengthen him before winter drives him from this coast. For the humpbacks, though, it's the end of their journey. The struggle from the coast demands too much. After spawning, they end their lives in the same streams where they were born. But as a legacy, they leave thousands of tons of food, energy from the ocean, which will feed the rivers for many months. They'll freeze in winter's ice, but the next spring will free their gift again and renew the timeless bargain between land and sea.